The void above the gas giant Ignis 7 was not silent. It was screaming with the electromagnetic death rattles of 1,000 machines. To the naked eye, the battle was a chaotic swarm of fireflies dancing against the bruised purple and violent orange bands of the planet below. To the sensors of the Wayfarer's joke, it was a nightmare of targeting locks and debris fields. Fighter drones buzzed like angry hornets, weaving through the shattered ribs of heavy frigates that drifted listlessly in the gravity well. In the center of the carnage, a royal cruiser, distinct by its teardrop shape and pearlescent hull, was bleeding fire. Its engines were dead, and it was tumbling slowly, inevitably, toward the crushing atmospheric pressure of the gas giant. Jace Cade watched the destruction with the grim detachment of a man who had seen too many battles and lost too much money on all of them. He sat slumped in the pilot's chair, the worn leather cracking under his flight suit. He was 38 years old, but the deep lines etched around his eyes and the gray streaking his stubble suggested a man who had lived double that time in half the years. His ship, the Wayfarer's joke, lived up to its name. It was an ugly, boxy freighter held together by patch welds, prayer, and illegal aftermarket software. It groaned as Jace banked hard to port, firing maneuvering thrusters to dodge a piece of hull plating the size of a city block that spun past his canopy. Just keep your head down, Jace told himself. You are a ghost. You are dust. He was not supposed to be here. The cargo hold behind him was packed floor to ceiling with crate-grown synthetic adrenal glands and unauthorized antibiotics. Medical contraband destined for a mining colony that the Trade Federation had blockaded. If he delivered it, he would clear his debt with the syndicate. If he got caught, he would spend the rest of his life turning big rocks into small rocks on a prison moon. His fingers danced over the haptic interface, dimming his thermal signature until the ship was freezing. He just needed to drift through the debris field, use the chaos as cover, and slingshot around the planet's gravity well. Then the console chirped. It was a sound Jace hated. It was the sound of a conscience he thought he had strangled years ago. A single red light pulsed on his dashboard, a distress beacon. It was not the standard military broadband scream. It was a tight beam. Encrypted signal on a frequency reserved for high nobility. Jace tapped the glass of the display. The sensor ghost resolved into an image. It was an escape pod, ejected from the dying royal cruiser moments before the main reactor went critical. The pod was sleek, silver, and emblazoned with the iridescent crest of the Etherean Empire, and it was in trouble. The explosion had knocked it off a stable trajectory. It was spinning violently, tumbling down toward the storm bands of Ignis 7. I am not doing this, Jace thought. I am absolutely not doing this. He looked at his fuel gauge. He looked at the timer counting down his window to clear the sector before the Federation capital ships arrived to mop up. He looked at the estimated value of his cargo. Then he looked at the pod again. It was falling into a Category 5 electrical storm. Whoever was inside had less than 10 minutes before they were crushed into paste or fried by lightning. Damn it all to hell, Jace whispered. He grabbed the flight stick, disengaged the safety limiters on the engines, and shoved the throttle forward. The Wayfarer's joke shuddered as if it had been kicked. The main thrusters roared, burning dirty fuel as Jace dove the ship straight down toward the planet. The G-force slammed him back into his seat, stealing the air from his lungs. The debris field became a blur of streaking metal. Warning. The ship's artificial intelligence droned in a monotone voice that sounded bored by their imminent death. Atmospheric entry imminent. Structural integrity at 70%. Shut up. Jace grunted through clenched teeth. The orange clouds rushed up to meet them. The ship shook violently as they hit the upper atmosphere. Plasma lightning, thick as tree trunks, crawled across the windshield, blinding him with flashes of violet light. The escape pod was a tiny speck ahead, bobbing and weaving in the turbulence. It was moving too fast. The navigation computer screamed that a docking lock was impossible. The chaotic winds were throwing the pod around like a leaf in a hurricane. Jace closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, exhaling a long breath. He ignored the computer. He ignored the screaming proximity alarms. He switched to manual control, relying on the muscle memory of 1,000 combat drops he wished he could forget. He was not going to dock with it. He was going to catch it. Jace fired the retro thrusters, killing his speed and dropping the ship directly into the path of the falling pod. He flipped the vessel belly up, opening the massive cargo bay doors to the roaring storm. "Come on," he growled. "Come on, you little shiny coffin." The wind sheared against the open bay doors, threatening to rip them off their hinges. The pod tumbled down, spinning wild. Jace feathered the ventral thrusters, adjusting the ship's drift to match the chaotic fall of the target. With a sickening crunch that vibrated through the entire hull, the pod slammed into the cargo bay. Jace smashed his hand onto the control panel. "Close it!" The hydraulics whined in protest, fighting the gale force winds. Slowly, agonizingly, the bay doors groaned shut, the atmospheric roar cut off, replaced by the hissing of pressurization cycles. Jace slumped in his chair, sweat dripping from his nose onto his flight suit. His hands were shaking. He took a moment to check the ship's diagnostics. He had burned 30% of his fuel reserve and fried 2 stabilizers. He unbuckled and grabbed the stun baton from under his seat. He did not know who he had just saved, but royals were usually ungrateful, and they almost always had armed guards. He made his way down the ladder to the cargo bay. The air here smelled of ozone and scorched metal. The escape pod lay wedged between 2 crates of synthetic organs, its silver hull scarred and dented from the impact. Steam hissed from its vents as it cooled. Jace stood back, baton ready. The explosive bolts on the pod's hatch blew outward with a sharp crack. The door fell away, clanging against the deck. A cloud of shimmering scented gas, the breathable atmosphere of the Etherin elite, rolled out, smelling of spiced lilies and cold starlight. A figure stumbled out of the mist and collapsed onto the deck plates. It was a woman, or rather, it was a being that looked mostly like a woman, but far more terrifying. She was tall, her skin the color of moonlight on snow. Bioluminescent markings, like living constellations, glowed softly beneath the surface of her skin, tracing the lines of her throat and arms. Her eyes were solid pools of indigo, lacking pupils or whites, wide with shock. She was dressed in ceremonial robes of woven platinum silk, now torn and scorched black in places. Jewels that would buy a small moon hung from her neck, clicking together as she breathed in ragged gasps. Jace lowered the baton slightly. She was alone, and she looked about as dangerous as a wet cat. The alien woman pushed herself up on trembling arms. She looked around the dirty, cluttered cargo bay, her gaze landing on Jace. She did not cower. She did not ask for help. She straightened her spine, raised her chin, and looked at him with an imperious glare that could have frozen a star. "I demand to be taken to the imperial capital immediately," she said. Her voice was melodic, buzzing with a strange harmonic undertone, but the tone was pure, spoiled command. "My cruiser was sabotaged. I am Princess Ceres Etherin, and you will obey me." Jace blinked. He looked at her, then at his battered ship, then back at her. He started to laugh. It was a dry, rasping sound. "Princess," he said, holstering the baton. "Look around. You are on a freighter that smells like old feet and engine grease. I have unpaid fuel bills that are older than you. We are not going to the capital. We are going to try not to die." Sarah stared at him, her glowing markings flaring brighter with indignation. "You do not understand. I am the third daughter of the eternal throne. My safety is paramount. You will set a course." A klaxon blared from the cockpit speakers, echoing through the bay. Jace's face went hard. He turned and sprinted back toward the ladder. "Stay there," he shouted over his shoulder, "and do not touch anything." He scrambled back into the pilot's seat just as the comms panel lit up. It was a Federation patrol drone. It had picked up the energy spike of his thrusters and was sweeping the storm band. "Unknown vessel." A mechanical voice crackled. "You are in a restricted combat zone. Heave to and prepare for biological and cargo manifest scan." Jace cursed. A biological scan when if they scanned the ship, they would pick up 2 heartbeats. 1 human, 1 Etheran. Harboring an enemy combatant, even a royal one, was treason. Harboring illegal medical cargo was a 20-year sentence. Having both? They would just vaporize him to save the paperwork. He had seconds to decide. He could try to run, but his stabilizers were shot. He could fight, but he had no guns. He had to ghost the sensor sweep. "Computer," Jace barked. "Dump cargo bays 1 through 4. Initiate emergency purge." "Are you certain?" the computer asked. "That is 50% of your total assets. Do it!" Jace screamed. He felt the ship lurch as the heavy crates were jettisoned into the storm. Thousands of credits worth of medical supplies tumbled away into the clouds. Jace keyed the comms, pitching his voice to sound panicked. "Federation Control, this is the freighter Wayfarer. I took a debris hit. My hull is breached. I am venting atmosphere and cargo. Please, my navigation is offline. I am just a scavenger trying to get clear." The patrol drone paused. Its sensors would see the cloud of debris, organic matter from the medical supplies mixed with the ship's refuse, scattering in the wind. It would create a chaotic biosignature field, masking the single alien life form on board. "Copy that. Wayfarer," the drone replied. "Indifferent. Clear the sector immediately. You are a hazard to navigation." Jace slumped back, watching the patrol drone peel away on the tactical map. He was alive, he was free, and he was broke. He had just flushed his payday, his fuel money, and his debt payment out the airlock. He sat there for a long time, the silence of the cockpit heavy and suffocating. Slowly, he spun the chair around. Saris was standing in the doorway of the cockpit. She had followed him up. She was gripping the doorframe, her knuckles white. She had watched the whole thing. She had seen him dump the cargo. She had heard the desperation in his voice. For the first time since she had crawled out of the pod, the arrogance was gone from her face. Her indigo eyes were wide, processing something she had no frame of reference for. "You threw it away," she said softly. "The cargo. You destroyed it." Jace rubbed his face with his hands. "Yeah, I did. To hide me," she stated. "It was not a question. To keep us both from being blown into stardust," Jace corrected, though his voice lacked heat. Saris looked at the man slumped in the chair. In the Golden Palace, people were assets. Alliances were weighed in tonnage and firepower. Marriages were contracts signed in blood and helium reserves. Sacrifice was a strategic maneuver, executed only when the return on investment was guaranteed. This man had just destroyed his livelihood to save a stranger who had demanded his obedience. It did not make sense. It was an equation that did not balance. An unfamiliar sensation twisted in her chest, a heavy, cold stone of guilt. She was not used to her life costing someone else theirs in such a direct, gritty way. "Get below," Jace said, turning back to the console. I need to plot a route to a trade station before we run on fumes. Saris retreated to the small, cramped crew cabin Jace had gestured to earlier. It was a box of a room, containing a bunk that smelled of stale laundry and a table bolted to the floor. She sat on the edge of the hard mattress, her finery pooling around her like liquid mercury in a gutter. Through the thin metal walls, she could hear Jace speaking. He was on the holocom. She did not mean to eavesdrop, but there was nowhere else to go. Look, Vrek, I need more time, Jace was saying. His voice was tight, pleading. The responding voice was a garbled, wet sound, an alien dialect translated by a cheap synthesizer. You have no time. Human. You promised payment upon delivery. You have no cargo. You have no credits. The syndicate is not a charity. I ran into trouble. Jace argued, a battle. I had to dump the load to survive. That is an excuse. The debt stands. With interest. If you do not have the 40,000 credits by the time you dock at Station 9, we will take the ship, and maybe we will take your eyes as collateral. The connection cut with a sharp static hiss. Then, the sound of something striking metal, Jace hitting the console in frustration. Saris sat in the dim light of the cabin. Her glowing markings pulsed slowly, rhythmic with her racing heart. 40,000 credits. It was a pitiful sum to an empire, the cost of a single banquet. But to this man, it was his life. She looked down at her hands. She had no credits. Her secure accounts would be frozen the moment her death was officially declared. Her jewelry was identifiable. Selling it would alert the assassins who had shot down her ship. She was trained in the economics of power. When you have no gold, you trade land. When you have no land, you trade loyalty. And when you have nothing else. She remembered the lessons of the harem court. She remembered the way treaties were sealed between the warlords of the Outer Rim. A body was an asset. A royal body was a premium asset. It was the only currency she had left that was unambiguously valuable in this lawless margin of space. She stood up. The decision settled over her with a grim, icy calm. She would not be a burden. She would pay her way. It was the honorable thing to do. It was the only thing she knew how to do. Saris walked to the small mirror bolted to the wall. She smoothed her torn dress. She pinched her cheeks to bring color to her pale skin. She practiced a smile, not the haughty command of a princess, but the inviting, submissive smile of a concubine. It felt like wearing a mask made of broken glass. She opened the door and walked down the short corridor to the cockpit. Jace was staring out at the stars, a bottle of cheap brown liquor in his hand. He looked exhausted, defeated. He did not look up when she entered. "We are setting course for Station 9, he said, his voice rough. "I will figure something out." Saris took a breath. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She stepped closer, invading his personal space. The scent of lilies and starlight filled the stale cockpit. "Captain," she said. Her voice trembled, but she forced steel into it. "I heard your call. I know what you lost." Jace swiveled the chair around. He looked at her, confused. "Look, Princess, do not worry about it. I have been in worse scrapes. I cannot pay you in credits." Saris interrupted. She stood tall, trying to salvage her dignity even as she prepared to discard it. "But I will not be in your debt. I was raised to understand the value of exchange." Jace frowned, lowering the bottle. "What are you talking about?" Saris reached up and unclasped the heavy platinum brooch at her shoulder. The silk of her dress loosened. She looked him directly in the eyes, her expression a tragic mix of royal bravado and terrified desperation. "Take off your pants," she said clearly. "I will pay my debt. The silence in the cockpit was absolute. The hum of the engines seemed to vanish. Jace froze. He blinked once, twice. He looked at her face, realizing she was absolutely serious. He looked at the bottle in his hand. Then, he choked. The liquor went down the wrong pipe, and he hacked, coughing violently. His face turned a brilliant beet red. He slammed the bottle down on the console and wheezed, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. He looked at her again, and a sound erupted from him, a laugh. But it wasn't the cynical rasp from before. It was a helpless, incredulous bark of laughter born of pure absurdity. "What?" he wheezed, tears forming in the corners of his eyes. "I am serious," Sarah said, her voice rising in pitch, offended by his reaction. "This is a valid transaction. I am of the royal line. My lineage is priceless. I am offering to clear the ledger." Jace waved a hand at her, struggling to breathe. "Stop. Just stop." He stood up, still chuckling, shaking his head. The laughter died down as he saw the confusion and hurt on her face. He saw that she was trembling. He realized that this wasn't a joke to her. She was terrified, and she was trying to buy her survival with the only thing she thought she owned. Jace sighed, the humor vanishing into a weary softness. He stepped forward, reaching out. Saris flinched, bracing herself. Jace reached past her and gently pulled the silk of her dress back up, clasping the brooch with clumsy, calloused fingers. "Princess," he said, his voice low and firm. "Keep your clothes on, and keep your dignity." Saris stared at him, her mouth slightly open. "But the debt, you lost everything." "Money is money," Jace said, stepping back to give her space. "I can make money. I can steal money. But I did not pull you out of a burning sky just to rent you for 20 minutes. "Rent?" The word struck her like a slap. "I am not a pimp, and you are not currency on this ship," Jace said. He picked up his bottle again, taking a long swig. "You are a passenger. A very annoying, very expensive passenger. But a passenger. We do not trade bodies here." Sarah stood rooted to the spot. The rejection hit her harder than the G-force of the escape pod. She was the third daughter. Wars had been fought for her hand, treaties signed for the promise of her fertility. Her value had always been extrinsic, what she could provide, what she could be traded for. He had refused her. He was poor, desperate, and hunted, and he had refused her. "Why?" she whispered. "Because," Jace said, turning back to the controls and keying in the coordinates for the jump to hyperspace. "I like to be able to look at myself in the mirror in the morning. Now go strap in. The jump to Station 9 is going to be rough." Saris turned slowly and walked back to the cabin. She sat on the bunk, her hands clutching the fabric of her dress where he had reclasped it. She felt foolish. She felt hot shame burning her cheeks. But beneath the shame, there was something else. A strange, hollow ache in her chest that felt terrifyingly like relief. She had been ready to sell herself, and he had told her she was not for sale. For the first time in her life, someone had looked at Saris Etherin and decided that her worth was not in what she could give them, but simply in the fact that she was alive. She lay back on the hard bunk as the stars outside streaked into lines of white fire. The world she knew had ended in fire and betrayal. But here, in the dark belly of a rust bucket freighter, a new and dangerous idea was beginning to take root. She was not an asset. She was just Sarah's, and she had no idea what to do with that. The Wayfarer's joke shuddered as it tore a hole in the fabric of space, leaving the storm-racked giant behind. Jace Cade stared into the vortex of hyperspace, the laughter gone, the weight of the 40,000 credit debt settling back onto his shoulders like a lead vest. He was an idiot, a soft-hearted, broke idiot. But as he listened to the silence of the ship, he knew he would do it again. He just hoped the princess knew how to peel potatoes, because until they hit Station 9, they were going to be eating emergency rations and hope didn't taste very good. The blue dwarf star, known in the star charts only as Calypso Major, cast a sickly, bruised light over the emptiness of the sector. Orbiting this dying star was Station 9, a massive rusted halo of durasteel and refuse that looked less like a space station and more like a cosmic junkyard held together by magnetic fields and bad intentions. Jace Cade guided the Wayfarer's joke out of hyperspace, the ship groaning as the sublight engines kicked in. The console immediately lit up with the chatter of 1,000 illegal frequencies, smugglers haggling over spice prices, bounty hunters coordinating grid searches, and the incessant droning advertisements for the pleasure districts. Jace ignored it all, his eyes fixed on the proximity sensors. "We are coming in hot," he muttered, flipping switches with practiced ease. "If anyone asks, we are hauling processed ore, heavy on the lead, light on the questions." Saris Ethrin stood behind his chair. She had changed out of her torn ceremonial silk into a spare flight suit he had dug out of a locker. It smelled of hydraulic fluid and old sweat, and it hung off her slender frame like a sack. "Station control to freighter," a voice crackled over the comms. "Prepare for biometric sovereign asset scan. We are looking for high-value fugitives. Maintain trajectory and lower shields." Jace swore softly. He cut the mic. "They are scanning for royal DNA markers," he said, unbuckling his harness. "They are looking for you." Saris stiffened, her hand going to her throat. "Then we must fight." "No," Jace said, standing up and grabbing a heavy tin of engine grease from a shelf. "We must hide. Get to the fresher. Now." The ship's bathroom was a closet-sized nightmare of stainless steel and flickering lights. Jace shoved Saris onto the closed toilet lid and stood over her, a pair of electric shears buzzing in his hand. "Do not move," he ordered. Saris looked at the shears, then at her own reflection in the cracked mirror. Her hair was a cascading waterfall of silver and amethyst, woven with micro-beads of ancestral data. It was the sign of her station, her history, her very soul. "It is just hair," she whispered, closing her eyes. "It is just dead cells." Jace worked quickly. He did not shave her bald, that would attract too much attention, but he sheared off the intricate floor-length braids, leaving a jagged punk rock chop that barely brushed her chin. The silver locks fell to the floor in soft piles. "Now for the hard part," Jace said. He scooped a handful of thick black engine grease from the tin. "Your markings," he said, pointing to the bioluminescent constellations glowing softly on her cheekbones and neck. "They are like a neon sign saying, 'Shoot me for money.'" Saris flinched as he smeared the foul-smelling goop onto her skin. The grease was cold and gritty. It covered the delicate light of her bloodline, turning her face into a mask of grime. He worked it into her hairline, down her neck, and over her hands, hiding the glowing veins that marked her as high-born. "You look terrible," Jace said, stepping back to admire his handiwork. He handed her a pair of welding goggles. "Put these on. Do not take them off." Saris looked in the mirror. The princess was gone. In her place sat a dirty, jagged-haired mechanic who looked like she had spent the last 10 years crawling through ventilation ducts. She stood up, tugging at the stiff, abrasive fabric of the flight suit. "This material is torture," she complained, scratching at her arm. "It feels like I am wearing a carpet made of wire. And why are there so many holes in it?" "They are called pockets," Jace said, opening the door. They are for putting things in. I have things in them, Sarah said. She reached into the deep thigh pocket of the suit and pulled out a handful of glittering stones, diamonds, rubies, and a sapphire the size of a bird's egg. They were clicking together as she walked. Jace stopped dead in the hallway. "Why are those in your pants?" he asked, his voice strangling. "I found them on the floor of the pod," Sarah said, stuffing them back in. "I thought they might be useful." "They are pretty rocks." "Pretty rocks," Jace repeated, rubbing his temples. "That is enough credits to buy this entire station. If you drop one of those in the bazaar, we will be stabbed before it hits the ground. Keep them hidden. And for the love of the void, stop jangling." They made their way to the airlock. As the pressure seal hissed open, the air of Station 9 hit them, a thick, humid wall of scent. It smelled of frying meat, ozone, exotic spices, and unwashed bodies. "Welcome to the armpit of the galaxy," Jace muttered, pulling his collar up. "Stay close, don't make eye contact, and if someone talks to you, grunt." They stepped out into the docking ring and into the chaos of the bazaar. Saris had spent her life in the silent, echoing halls of the Crystal Palace, where servants moved like ghosts and the air was scrubbed of all scent. This was an assault on her senses. The corridor was packed shoulder to shoulder with species from a dozen worlds. A four-armed merchant was shouting about cut-rate blasters. A drone hovered overhead, projecting a holographic advertisement for a localized rainstorm experience. Music, a thumping, discordant bass rhythm vibrated through the deck plates. She felt a wave of panic, a desire to retreat to the silence of the ship. But then, a second wave hit her. Exhilaration. It was loud. It was dirty. It was undeniably alive. She watched a mother scolding a child with green skin. She watched two pilots arguing over a game of chance involving glowing dice. No one bowed to her. No one looked at her. She was invisible, just another piece of drift in the current. Jace grabbed her elbow, steering her through the crowd. "Keep moving." "Grease face," he whispered. He led her down a labyrinth of side alleys, away from the main promenade, until they reached a door marked with a glowing red eye. Jace knocked a complicated rhythm on the metal. The door slid open with a grind of rust. Inside, the air was cold and smelled of sulfur. The room was dominated by a massive bank of screens, flickering with data streams from across the sector. In the center of the web sat Rek. Rek was a mollusk-kin, a bloated slug-like creature with wet gray skin and 3 eyes on independent stalks. He was coated in a layer of protective slime that shimmered in the monitor light. "Jace Cade," Rek burped, his voice a wet slap sound. "You are alive. I lost money on that bet." "Good to see you too." "Rek," Jace said, leaning against a stack of servers. "I need info. The Royal Cruiser Ethelgard." "What is the word?" Rek's eyes swiveled independently, one looking at Jace, one at Saris, and one at a screen displaying stock prices. "Bad business," Frek said. "The Empire is locking down the sector. The official report says the cruiser suffered a reactor containment failure." "And the survivors?" Jace asked. Rek made a gurgling sound that might have been a laugh. "There were no survivors." "Cade, the official report says the Princess Saris Aetherin died in the blast, a tragic accident caused by her own incompetence. They are saying she was trying to flee the system to join a separatist movement." Saris stepped forward, forgetting her role. "That is a lie." Rek's 3 eyes snapped to her. The welding goggles hid her eyes. But the tone of her voice was unmistakable. "Who is the mechanic?" Rek asked, leaning forward, slime trailing from his chin. "Just a hire," Jace said quickly, stepping between them. "A mute. Very tragic. Saris pushed past Jace, her hands balling into fists inside the oversized sleeves. "They are calling me a traitor?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "They are saying I abandoned my people?" Vrek's eyes narrowed. He looked at Jace, then at the grease-smeared woman. The realization hit him slowly. "Oh," Vrek whispered. "Oh, this is very expensive information." Jace sighed and dropped his hand to the blaster on his hip. "Vrek, focus. Who is saying this?" "The Regent Lord Kale," Vrek said, retreating slightly into his chair. "He has assumed emergency powers. He is mourning his niece deeply. He has already ordered a fleet mobilization to hunt down the separatist cell that corrupted her." Saris felt the blood drain from her face. Uncle Kale. He had given her the escape pod codes. He had told her which trajectory to take. He had sent her straight into the storm. "He framed me," she whispered. "He tried to kill me, and now he is using my memory to start a war." Jace grabbed her arm, hard. "We are leaving. Vrek, forget you saw us." Vrek's eyes wiggled. "Cade, listen to me. It is not just a death notice. There is a bounty, a silent one, not on the public boards." "What kind of bounty?" Jace asked. Vrek tapped a key, and a hologram projected into the air. It was a rotating DNA helix, marked with the Imperial seal. 50 million credits, Vrek said. Jace whistled low. "For the princess's head?" "No," Vrek said. "The wording is specific. 50 million for confirmation of death or delivery of viable genetic samples. They want her body, Cade, dead or alive, but they want the biology intact." The words hung in the sulfurous air, viable genetic samples. It sounded clinical. It sounded like they wanted a lab rat, not a person. Jace pulled Saris toward the door. "We are done here." They moved fast through the back alleys, putting distance between themselves and the broker. Saris was silent, her mind reeling. "We have to go back," she said suddenly, stopping in the middle of a dark corridor. Jace turned, his face shadowed. "Are you crazy? Did you not hear the slug? The entire Empire is looking for you. If you go back, they will dissect you." "I cannot let Kale do this," Saris said, ripping the welding goggles off. Her indigo eyes burned in the gloom. "He is lying to my people. He is using my name to hurt them. I have to expose him." "Saris, listen to me," Jace said, grabbing her shoulders. "You are dead. The galaxy thinks you are dead. That is a gift. I can take you to the rim. There are moons there where no one asks questions, but you can live. You can be a mechanic, a farmer, anything. You can survive. I do not want to just survive," she shouted, her voice echoing off the metal walls. "I am not a farmer. I am the heir to the throne. My responsibility is to the people Kale is going to crush." Jace released her, throwing his hands up. "Your responsibility? You are one girl in a jumpsuit that does not fit. You have no army. You have no money. You have a pilot who is 40,000 credits in debt and a ship held together by duct tape. You cannot fight an empire." "I have to try," Saris said, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper. "If I run, I prove him right. I become the traitor he says I am." Jace stared at her. He saw the fire in her eyes, the stubborn, reckless nobility that was going to get her killed. It clashed violently with his own philosophy. Stay low, stay moving, stay alive. "Fine," he growled. "We will talk about it on the ship. But first, I need a drink. My nerves are shot." They ducked into a cantina near the docking bays. It was a wretched hive called the Rust Bucket, filled with smoke and the drone of a synth jazz band. Jace pushed her into a booth in the back corner. "Keep your head down," he warned. "I am going to get 2 whiskeys. Double." Saris huddled in the corner. pulling the collar of her suit up. She watched Jace walk to the bar. He moved with a predator's grace, scanning the room even as he ordered. She felt small. The conversation with Rek had stripped away her last illusion of safety. She was not just a fugitive, she was raw material, viable genetic sample. The phrase made her skin crawl. Suddenly, the lights in the cantina flickered. A power surge, common on the failing station, rippled through the grid. The artificial gravity lurched for a second, spilling drinks. In the brief darkness, Saris gasped. Her fear triggered a biological reaction. The grease Jace had smeared on her face was thick, but it wasn't perfect. As the adrenaline hit her system, her bioluminescence flared. For a split second, before the emergency lights kicked in, her face glowed. The indigo light shone through the thin spots in the grease, tracing the royal constellations of the Etherin line. It was only a second, but it was enough. At the bar, a mercenary, a heavy-set human with a cybernetic eye, paused with his drink halfway to his mouth, his mechanical eye whirred, zooming in. It captured the flash of blue light in the corner booth. It cross-referenced the pattern with the new silent bounty he had just downloaded. The mercenary smiled, revealing steel teeth. He tapped a sequence into his wristcom. Jace returned to the table, slamming 2 glasses down. "Drink up. We are leaving." He saw the look on her face. "What happened?" "The lights," Saris whispered. I think I flashed." Jace froze. He scanned the room. The mercenary at the bar was gone. "Move," Jace hissed. They bolted for the exit, shoving past a table of startled miners. They burst out into the corridor and ran for the docking bay. "I told you to keep calm," Jace shouted as they ran. "I cannot control it," Saris shouted back, struggling to keep up in the baggy suit. "It is a biological response to stress. You took me to a bar on a station hunting me." "I was trying to blend in," Jace argued. They reached the cargo bay where the Wayfarer's joke was docked. It was quiet here, the vast hangar empty except for a few loading droids. Jace stopped, spinning to face her. His chest was heaving. "This is not going to work," he said, his voice hard. "You are a walking target. I cannot protect you if you light up like a flare every time you get scared." "I am not asking you to protect me," Saris yelled, throwing her hands up. The jewels in her pocket jangled absurdly. "I am asking you to help me fight. I am not a soldier," Jace roared. "I am a delivery boy. I haul boxes. I do not fight empires." "Then why did you save me?" Saris demanded. She stepped close to him, the anger burning away her fear. "Why did you risk your ship? Why did you refuse my offer?" Jace looked away, his jaw tight. "You confuse me. Jace Cade," she said, her voice shaking with frustration and something else, something hot and magnetic. "You act like a mercenary, but you refuse payment. You act like a scoundrel, but you refuse sex. You act like a coward, but you flew into a storm for a stranger. What are you?" "I am a man who wants to live," Jace snapped. "I do not believe you," Saris challenged. "I think you are a man waiting for something worth dying for." The air between them crackled. It was not just the static of the station, it was the tension of 2 people from opposite ends of the universe colliding. Jace looked at her, really looked at her beneath the grease and the terrible haircut. He saw the steel in her spine. He opened his mouth to answer, to tell her she was delusional. The blast door behind them exploded. Jace tackled Saris, throwing them both behind a stack of shipping crates as shrapnel screamed through the air. Armored figures poured through the smoke. There were 4 of them, bounty hunters clad in sleek, matte black armor. They moved with coordinated precision, their weapons raised. But these were not standard blasters. The rifles hummed with a strange, dampening frequency. "Target located." A digitized voice boomed, deploying suppression field. A wave of energy washed over the cargo bay. The lights overhead dimmed. Sarah screamed, clutching her chest. "It feels like ice," she cried. "They are draining the ambient energy. They have tech adapted to you," Jace realized, pulling his stun baton and a heavy blaster pistol. "They came prepared for an Etherin." "Suppression fire!" Jace yelled, popping up and firing 2 wild shots. The bolts splashed harmlessly against the hunter's shields. "Surrender the asset," the lead hunter commanded. "We require the biological sample intact." Jace looked around. They were pinned. The hunters were advancing, their suppression field weakening Saris by the second. She was pale, the grease standing out starkly against her graying skin. Jace looked at the ceiling. A massive ventilation duct ran directly over the hunters' heads. "Can you run?" Jace asked. "I can barely breathe." Saris gasped. "Good enough." Jace reached into his belt and pulled out a magnetic grapple. He aimed not at the hunters, but at the control panel for the airlock on the far wall. "Hold your breath," Jace screamed. He fired. The grapple hit the panel, shattering the controls. Jace yanked the cable, shorting the circuit. The external airlock roared open. For 3 seconds, the vacuum of space clawed at the hangar. The atmosphere screamed as it was sucked out. The crates they were hiding behind were bolted down, but the hunters were caught off guard. 2 of them were lifted off their feet and slammed into the far wall. The suppression field flickered and died. Jace hit the emergency seal override on his wrist comp. The blast doors slammed shut, cutting off the vacuum. Gravity and air pressure normalized instantly, leaving everyone reeling. "Now!" Jace yelled, grabbing Saris's hand. They broke cover, sprinting across the deck. The 2 remaining hunters recovered instantly, leveling their weapons. Jace fired at the floor plates. He had modified his blaster settings. He wasn't trying to penetrate their armor. He was superheating the deck. The floor beneath the hunters turned to molten slag, causing them to stumble. But a third figure, the one who had been slammed against the wall, raised a gauntlet. A net of crackling energy shot out, wrapping around Jace's legs. He went down hard, his blaster skittering away. "Jace!" Sarah screamed. She stopped running. She turned back. "Run!" Jace shouted, struggling against the shock net. The hunters ignored him. They advanced on Saris, their weapons glowing with a capture pulse. "The asset is secured," the leader said. Saris backed up until her back hit a massive power conduit running along the wall. It was a main junction for the station's grid, thick with shielded cables. She was cornered, she was terrified, and she was furious. She felt the hum of the electricity in the conduit against her spine. It felt familiar. It felt like the blood in her veins. The lesson of the storm returned to her. Her biology interacts with energy. The hunter reached for her. Saris didn't think. She didn't calculate. She acted on pure instinct. She turned and slammed both hands onto the exposed junction box of the conduit. She didn't get electrocuted. Instead, she became the circuit. Her eyes snapped open, and the indigo light blew the welding goggles off her face. The grease burned away in a flash of pure radiance. Her markings blazed with the brightness of a supernova. The energy from the station's reactor didn't kill her. It flowed through her. She was a lens, focusing the raw power. With a scream that was half agony and half ecstasy, Saris pushed the energy outward. A shockwave of blue lightning exploded from her body. It wasn't just electricity, it was a quantum disruption wave. It washed over the hunters. Their armor didn't melt, it simply shut down. The complex AIs running their suits fried instantly. Their weapons sparked and died. The suppression field generator on the leader's back exploded in a shower of sparks. The hunters collapsed, their suits now heavy, unpowered coffins trapping them inside. The light faded. Saris crumpled to the deck, unconscious. Jace kicked free of the dead shock net. He scrambled over to her, checking her pulse. It was racing, hammering against her skin like a hummingbird. He looked at the hunters. They were neutralized. He looked at the conduit. It was melted, fused into a lump of twisted metal. Then he looked at Saris. She wasn't just a princess. She wasn't just a political fugitive. Jace realized why the bounty wanted a genetic sample. She wasn't just a battery. She was a key, a biological interface capable of rewriting energy fields on a level he had never seen. He scooped her up in his arms. She felt fever-hot. "We are in deep trouble." "Princess," Jace whispered. He carried her up the ramp of the Wayfarer's Joke, hitting the launch sequence before his ass even hit the pilot's seat. As the ship blasted out of the docking bay, leaving the crippled hunters behind, Jace looked at the unconscious woman in the passenger seat. The game had changed. They weren't running from a political coup anymore. They were running from anyone who wanted to control the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy. And for the first time in 10 years, Jace Cade wasn't thinking about his debt. He was thinking that he would burn the entire universe down before he let them put her in a cage. "Computer," Jace said, his voice deadly calm. "Plot a course for the wormhole gate, the illegal one." "But Captain," the computer droned, "that route is unmapped. It is suicide." "Do it," Jace said, pushing the throttle to the stops. "We are already dead men walking. We might as well take the scenic route." The sensors of the Wayfarer's Joke screamed a warning that Jace Cade felt in his teeth. Behind them, the starfield had been blotted out by a silhouette that should not have existed. It was a warship, sleek and predatory, painted in a matte black that drank the light of the distant stars. On its flank, visible only by the running lights that pulsed like a slow, venomous heartbeat, were two sigils side by side, the golden sunburst of the Etheran Empire and the interlocking DNA helix of Helix Dynamics, a corporate imperial hybrid, a violation of every treaty in the sector. "Hold on," Jace shouted, throwing the freighter into a corkscrew dive that groaned against the ship's artificial gravity. The warship fired. Beams of coherent particle energy lashed out, silent and green, boiling the vacuum where the Wayfarer had been a microsecond before. "They are fast," Jace growled, sweat stinging his eyes. "And they are not trying to disable us anymore. They are trying to vaporize the evidence." Saris stood behind him, clutching the back of his pilot's chair. Her flight suit was still oversized, her hair a jagged mess from the shears, but the fear in her posture had hardened into a grim focus. She watched the tactical display, seeing the enemy ship gain ground with terrifying ease. "We cannot outrun them," Saris said. Her voice was steady, contrasting the chaos of the cockpit alarms. "That is a Nemesis-class interdictor. It has military-grade engines." "I know what it is," Jace snapped, his hands flying across the controls. "I flew one during the Unification Wars." He banked hard toward the only cover within 1 billion kilometers, a pulsar, a spinning neutron star that whipped a beam of deadly radiation around like a cosmic lighthouse. Its accretion disk was a swirling storm of ionized gas and hard X-rays. "You are flying into the radiation halo?" Saris asked, her knuckles white on the leather of the chair. "It is the only place their targeting sensors will be blind," Jace said. "Or it will cook us alive. Pick your poison, princess." He punched the throttle, and the Wayfarer plunged into the pulsar's wake. The ship shuddered violently. The radiation shielding began to whine, a high-pitched keen that vibrated through the deck plates. Outside the viewport, the universe turned into a blinding kaleidoscope of violet and angry blue. The roar of the magnetic turbulence was deafening, drowning out the computer's incessant warnings about hull integrity. "Shields are dropping," Jace yelled over the noise. 40%, 30. The pursuer was still there, a shadow in the storm. The corporate warship had better shielding. It was cutting through the turbulence, closing the distance for a kill shot. "Jace, the shields!" Saris cried out as a glancing blow from a plasma bolt rocked the ship, sending sparks showering from the overhead console. "I cannot conjure energy out of thin air," Jace shouted back, wrestling with the yoke. "The generator is redlining." Saris looked at the failing shield readout. She looked at the back of Jace's head, at the tension in his neck. She remembered the station. She remembered the power conduit. She did not ask for permission. She did not hesitate. Saris lunged for the engineering panel on the bulkhead wall. She ripped the cover off the auxiliary power coupling, exposing the thick, shielded cables that fed the deflector array. "Do not touch that," Jace roared, glancing back. "It will kill you." "It will not," Saris said, her voice echoing with a strange, harmonic resonance. She grabbed the live cables with both hands. This time, there was no grease to hide the light. Her bioluminescence flared, turning her skin into a map of living starlight. The indigo glow blinded the dim cockpit. She did not scream. Instead, she gasped, a sound of sharp intake breath as she forced her own bioelectric field to synchronize with the ship's dying reactor. The effect was instantaneous. The lights on the dashboard surged from amber to blinding white. The shield integrity bar on Jace's display shot up from 20% to 120%. The hum of the ship changed pitch, deepening into a powerful, resonant thrum that vibrated in Jace's very bones. Jace felt it through the control yoke. The metal grew warm under his palms, pulsing with a rhythm that was not mechanical. It was a heartbeat. Her heartbeat. He could feel her fear, her adrenaline, and the raw, terrifying power she was channeling. It flowed through the ship's neural network and into his hands. It was an intimacy more profound and shocking than touch. For a moment, he was not flying a machine, he was flying her. "Hold the course," Saris whispered. Her voice came not from behind him, but through the ship's comms, directly into his ear, breathless and strained. "I am with you." Jace gritted his teeth, his own heart hammering in sync with the pulse in the controls. He slammed the thrusters to maximum. The Wayfarer, energized by royal blood and desperation, leaped forward. They skimmed the edge of the pulsar's event horizon, riding the gravitational shear. The pursuing warship, unable to match the sudden, impossible burst of speed and shielding, was caught in a wash of radiation. Jace saw the enemy vessel veer off, its sensors blinded, its hull plating beginning to buckle under the magnetic stress. "We are clear," Jace breathed, his voice shaking. He pulled the ship out of the gravity well, aiming for the deep black of open space. Saris released the cables and collapsed. The cabin lights dimmed back to normal. Jace was out of his seat in a second. He caught her before she hit the deck. She was trembling, her skin fever-hot, the markings fading from blinding white back to a soft, pulsing blue. "You are crazy," Jace murmured, brushing a strand of sweat-soaked hair from her face. "You are absolutely crazy." Saris looked up at him, her chest heaving. "We are alive." Jace looked at her, his hands lingering on her arms. The heat of the connection still tingled in his fingertips. The air between them was charged, electric with the aftermath of near death. He wanted to shake her. He wanted to kiss her. He did neither. "Get back in the chair," he said, his voice rough. "We are not safe yet. We need to disappear." They limped toward the coordinates Jace had locked in, an unregistered anomaly in the star charts known only to the desperate and the damned. The Smuggler's Gate. It was a naturally occurring wormhole, stabilized by ancient, illegal tech that looked like rusted debris floating in the void. It was unstable, dangerous, and the only way to cross the sector without tripping Imperial sensors. "Strap in," Jace warned. "This is not like hyperspace. The gate, it plays tricks on your head." Saris buckled herself into the co-pilot seat. "What kind of tricks? You will see. Just remember, whatever you see, it is not real. Keep your eyes on the nav beacon." Jace guided the ship into the swirling, oil-slick distortion of the gate. The universe fractured. There was no sensation of movement. Instead, time seemed to fold in on itself. The cockpit walls dissolved into mirrors of shifting light. Saris gasped. In the reflection of the canopy, she did not see the stars. She saw herself, but it was not the Saris sitting in the chair. To her left, she saw a version of herself drifting in the vacuum, eyes frosted over, skin gray. The version of herself that had died in the escape pod if Jace had not come. The dead eyes stared at her with accusation. To her right, the image shifted. She saw herself standing on the golden throne of the Etherin. She was wearing the heavy imperial crown. Her face was beautiful, smooth, and utterly devoid of humanity. In this reflection, she was signing a document, her hand steady. Beside her stood her Uncle Kale, smiling. In the background, planets were burning. Saris watched in horror as her mirror self nodded to a general, authorizing the conscription of children for the front lines. She saw herself trading millions of lives for a stable border. Her heart calcified into a stone of pure political pragmatism. "No," Saris whispered, squeezing her eyes shut. "I will not be her. Look at me." Jace's voice cut through the visions. Saris opened her eyes. She looked at Jace, but the Jace in the pilot's seat was flickering too. For a second, she saw a version of him wearing a pristine Imperial Admiral's uniform, cold and cruel. Then she saw a version of him lying in a gutter on Station 9, a bottle in his hand, dead from an overdose. Then, for a heartbreaking instant, she saw a third image. She saw herself and Jace standing on a balcony overlooking a silver sea. They were older. He was laughing, gray hair at his temples. She was holding a child with glowing markings. They looked happy. They looked peaceful. Then the vision shattered. The Wayfarer's joke erupted from the wormhole, spitting them out into the cold, hard reality of normal space. The nausea hit them both instantly. Jace dry heaved, clutching his stomach. Saris slumped forward, shaking. "We made it," Jace groaned, wiping his mouth. "We are in the border zones." Saris stared at the blank console. The image of the cold queen still burned into her retinas. "I saw what I could become," she whispered, her voice hollow. "If I go back, if I take the power, I could become a monster." "You saw a ghost," Jace said, his voice firm. "The gate shows you fears, it shows you possibilities, it does not show you the future. You choose who you are." "Saris, not the gate, not your uncle. You..." Saris looked at him. "Did you see it too? The other lives?" Jace looked at the stars, his expression unreadable. "I saw enough." He punched in a new frequency on the comms. "I am calling in a favor," he said, changing the subject. A big one. The meeting point was a rogue planetoid, an ice ball drifting in the dark between star systems. The winds here clocked in at 200 kilometers an hour, screaming over plains of blue-white nitrogen ice. Jace landed the ship in the lee of a massive glacier. "She will be here," Jace said, checking his sidearm. "Who is she?" Saris asked, pulling a thermal cloak over her flight suit. "Commander Ellen Varro," Jace said. "My old C.O. She is the liaison for the Imperial fleet in this sector. She is the only person in the universe I trust not to shoot me on sight." They waited in the howling wind at the base of the ramp. 10 minutes later, the snow swirled and parted as a ship decloaked. It was a corvette, small but deadly. landing with a predatory silence. A ramp descended. A squad of soldiers in white winter armor marched out, weapons raised. In the lead walked a woman who looked like she was carved from the ice itself. She had severe gray-cropped hair and a scar running from her ear to her jaw. She wore the uniform of the Imperial Navy, but her rank insignia was scuffed, worn. "Jace Cade," the woman shouted over the wind. "You have a lot of nerve pinging my personal frequency. You are a wanted man." "Hello to you too, Ellen," Jace shouted back. "I brought a friend." Sarah stepped forward, lowering her hood. The bioluminescence on her face cut through the gloom. Commander Varro froze. The soldiers behind her shifted, uncertain. Varro walked forward, her boots crunching on the ice. She stopped 2 meters from Saris. She looked at the princess, then at the death notice on her data pad, then back at the princess. She saluted. It was sharp, crisp, and respectful. "Your Highness," Varro said. "You look like hell. I have had a bad week." "Commander," Saris said, her voice steady despite the cold. "Get inside," Varro ordered, gesturing to her corvette, before a probe droid spots us. Inside the corvette's briefing room, the air was warm and smelled of filtered coffee. Varro dismissed her squad, leaving only herself, Jace, and Saris. She threw a data pad onto the table. It slid across and hit Jace's hand. "You two have stepped into a meat grinder," Varro said grimly. "We know about Kale," Saris said. "He tried to kill me. He is staging a coup." "It is worse than a coup," Varro said. She tapped the table, and a hologram sprang to life. It showed the capital city, the crystal spires rising from the silver ocean. Then, the view shifted, diving underwater deep beneath the continental shelf. It showed a massive, dormant structure buried in the seabed. It was ancient, inscribed with glyphs that predated the Empire. "Do you know what this is?" Varro asked. "It is a myth," Saris said, frowning. "The Atheran Anchor, a folklore story about the first settlers." "It is real," Varro corrected. "And it is not an anchor. It is a planetary defense array, a gravity manipulator. It was built to shield the planet from cosmic storms. But Helix Dynamics figured out it can be retargeted." "Helix?" Jace asked. "The corporation? They have been mining the data for years," Varro explained. "If they activate the array, they can crush a fleet in orbit. They can level a city on the other side of the planet by increasing the gravity to 100 Gs. It is the ultimate weapon." "What does this have to do with me?" Saris asked, a cold dread pooling in her stomach. "The interface," Varro said, looking directly at Saris. "The ancient tech is biometric. It is locked to the genetic resonance of the founding bloodline, your bloodline. It needs a royal Etherin to turn the key." Saris stared at the hologram, the bounty, the demand for a viable genetic sample. "They do not just want me dead," she whispered. "They want my blood. They have already grown a clone," Varro revealed, dropping the bomb with brutal efficiency. "Helix Labs. Accelerated growth. It has your face, your DNA, but none of your mind. It is a meat puppet. They plan to present it at the unification ceremony in 2 days. The clone will activate the weapon, hand control to Kale and Helix, and the Empire will become a corporate subsidiary." Saris felt the room spin. She grabbed the edge of the table. All her life, she had been told her body was sacred. She had been protected, polished, and prepared for a marriage that would secure trade routes. She had thought that was objectification. She was wrong. This was objectification. To them, she was not a person. She was a spark plug, a component in a machine of mass destruction. She stood up abruptly. her chair scraping loudly against the metal floor. "I need a moment," she choked out. She turned and fled the briefing room, finding a small, empty airlock antechamber down the hall. She curled into a ball in the corner, her forehead pressed against the cold metal, shaking. The door hissed open. Jace walked in. He didn't say anything. He just slid down the wall and sat next to her. "They grew a thing with my face," Sarah said, her voice muffled by her knees. "They are going to use it to enslave my people. And the only reason they needed me, the only reason I matter, is my biology." "That is not true," Jace said quietly. "It is true." Sarah lifted her head, tears streaming down her face, sizzling slightly as they touched her glowing markings. "That is all I am. I am a key. I am a bargaining chip." She turned to him, her eyes wide and desperate. "That is why I offered myself to you," she confessed, the words tumbling out. "On the ship, when I told you to, when I tried to pay you. It was not just desperation, Jace. It was because I thought that was the only thing I was good for. I thought, at least if I give myself to him, I am choosing who uses me." Jace flinched. The words hit him like a physical blow. Sarah continued, her voice breaking. "And you laughed. You laughed at me. And I realized that even my body, the one thing I thought had value, was a joke to you." "No," Jace said. The word was sharp, commanding. He shifted, turning to face her fully. He took her hands. His grip was not gentle, it was desperate. "I did not laugh because you were worthless, Saris. I laughed because I was terrified." Saris blinked, the tears stopping for a moment. "Terrified?" Jace looked down at their joined hands. He took a deep breath, stripping away the layers of sarcasm and cynicism he wore like armor. "I looked at you, standing there in that cockpit, terrified and brave and beautiful, offering me the only thing you had left. And I wanted to say yes." Saris froze. "I wanted you," Jace admitted, his voice rough with honesty. "I have wanted you since I pulled you out of that pod, but if I had said yes, if I had taken you then, when you felt like you had no other choice, I would have been just like them. I would have been another person taking a piece of you because I could." He looked up, meeting her gaze. His eyes were dark and intense. "Sex is not payment, Saris. It is not a trade. To me, it is the one thing that cannot be bought. I laughed because the idea that you thought you had to buy my help broke my heart." Saris stared at him, the silence stretched between them, heavy and fragile. She replayed the moment in her mind, his laughter, his refusal. "I didn't save you to rent you." It wasn't a rejection of her. It was a rejection of the transaction. He had protected her dignity even when she was trying to throw it away. "You could have taken advantage of me," she whispered. "I would rather die," Jace said simply. The realization washed over her, cleansing the shame she had carried since that moment. He respected her. He saw her. Saris leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. She closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of engine grease and leather that clung to him. "I have never been allowed to want anything," she said softly. "I was told who to marry. I was told where to stand. I was told my duty." She pulled back slightly, looking at his mouth, then his eyes. I think I want to choose," she said. Jace's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing the glowing constellation under her eye. "Then choose to survive this." The door to the antechamber opened. Varro stood there, looking impatient. "I hate to interrupt the soap opera," Varro said dryly. "But we have a war to stop." Sarah stood up. She wiped her face. The fragility was gone, replaced by a cold, burning resolve. What is the plan, Commander? Saris asked. Varro brought up the schematic of the capital. The unification ceremony is in 48 hours. The clone will be there. Kale will be there. The Helix board of directors will be there. We infiltrate, Varro said. We get you to the artifact chamber. You override the system before the clone can activate it. You prove you are alive, and you broadcast the truth about Helix. It is a suicide run, Jace noted, looking at the defenses. The palace is a fortress. Yes, Varro agreed. And we need a pilot who can fly a dropship through a defensive grid designed to vaporize frigates. She looked at Jace. Jace looked at the schematic. He looked at the odds. It was impossible. It was stupid. It was exactly the kind of thing that got ex-military drifters killed. He hesitated. He had his ship. He could leave. He could go to the rim, disappear, and live a long, quiet, lonely life. Saris stepped in front of him. She did not command. She did not offer money. She did not offer her body. She held out her hand. Help me. Jace, she said. Not because you owe me. Not because I am a princess. Help me because you believe I am more than what they made me. Help me because you are the only one I trust to fly me into the fire. Jace looked at her hand. He looked at the woman who had channeled a pulsar through her veins to save his beat-up ship. He reached out and clasped her hand. He didn't shake it. He held it, his fingers interlocking with hers, palm to palm. It was a pact. It was a promise. It was more intimate than any kiss could have been in that moment. I guess the Wayfarer's joke has one more run in her, Jace said, a crooked grin finally breaking through his scowl. Let's go crash a wedding. Princess. The transport shuttle descended through the cloud layer of Etheria Prime, and the capital city revealed itself like a jewel dropped into a sea of mercury. To Jace Cade, who had spent his life in the grimy, rust-colored corners of the outer rim, the sight was almost offensive in its perfection. The city was a collection of crystalline spires floating effortlessly above the endless, silver ocean, anchored by gravity tethers that hummed with a low, resonant frequency. Light bridges connected the towers, weaving a web of photon energy where air cars glided like silent fish. It was beautiful. It was majestic. And it was currently plastered with the face of a dead woman. Jace glanced sideways at the technician sitting next to him. Saris was indistinguishable from the rest of their squad. She wore the drab, slate-gray jumpsuit of a Helix Dynamics Level 4 tech. Her chopped hair was tucked under a polarized cap, and a heavy visor obscured the upper half of her face. But Jace could see her hands. They were clenched so tightly in her lap that the knuckles were white. He looked back out the window as the shuttle banked toward the central spire. A massive holographic banner rippled in the wind, projected from the side of the royal palace. It showed Saris in her ceremonial finery. Long hair, jewels, regal expression. The text scrolling beneath it was in High Etherin and Trade Common, in memory of Princess Saris, the martyr of the storm. Her sacrifice binds us. Do not look at it, Jace murmured, barely moving his lips. I cannot help it, Saris whispered back, her voice thick with suppressed rage. They have turned me into a saint. Better a saint than a fugitive, Jace noted. Saints do not get shot at. They do if they come back from the dead, Saris countered. The shuttle docked at the lower maintenance bay of the Grand Spire. Commander Varro, disguised as a Helix security contractor, stood up first. She adjusted her belt, checking the placement of her concealed shock pistol. Look alive, people, Varro barked at her squad. We are here to inspect the seismic dampers on the oceanic foundation. Keep your heads down, do your jobs, and do not speak unless spoken to. They filed out into the hangar. It was a hive of activity. Drones buzzed overhead carrying crates of equipment marked with the Helix logo. Imperial guards in white and gold armor stood at every checkpoint, their faces impassive behind faceless helms. Saris walked in the middle of the group, carrying a heavy tool case. She kept her head lowered, but Jace stayed close enough to brush her shoulder with his own. A silent reminder. I am here. They moved through the corridors of the spire, heading down, always down. The Aetherin anchor, the artifact, was not in the towers. It was buried deep in the bedrock beneath the ocean floor. As they waited for the submersible elevator, a news feed played on a wall screen. It showed Regent Lord Kale standing at a podium, looking suitably mournful. My niece was a troubled soul, Kale was saying, wiping a non-existent tear. She was seduced by radical elements, but in her final moments, she tried to return to us. We will honor her memory by completing the work she could not. The unification ceremony will proceed. Saris made a small, choked sound. Jace moved to block her from the view of a passing guard. Easy, he whispered. He is just a talking head. We are going to cut his strings. The elevator arrived, a massive circular platform enclosed in reinforced transparent steel. They stepped onto it along with a dozen other real technicians and crates of supplies. The doors hissed shut, and the platform began to descend. They passed through the lower levels of the spire, then the sub-basements, and then, with a shift in pressure that popped their ears, they submerged. The view through the glass walls changed from steel to water. The silver ocean of Etheria was not empty. As they sank deeper, the light from the surface faded, replaced by the bioluminescence of the deep. Great ribbon-like eels swam past, trailing glowing blue wake. Massive shapes moved in the distance, the leviathans, whales the size of frigates, their skin etched with natural patterns that mirrored the Aetherin script. Saris stared out into the dark water. The deeper they went, the more she felt it. A hum. A vibration in her teeth, an itch under her skin. The artifact was down here, and it knew she was coming. Look at the rock, Saris whispered to Jace. He looked. As the submersible passed a trench wall, he saw that the stone wasn't natural. It was carved. Massive monoliths, hundreds of meters tall, stood like sentinels in the gloom. They were etched with glowing geometric lines, power conduits that had been dormant for thousands of years, now pulsing with a faint, rhythmic light. The markings on Saris's chest, hidden beneath her jumpsuit, flared in response. She winced, pressing a hand to her sternum. "It is loud," she murmured. "It is singing." "What is it saying?" Jace asked. "It is saying it is waking up," Saris replied, "and it is afraid." The submersible docked at the underwater facility, a sprawling complex of glass domes and tunnels bolted directly into the ancient ruins. This was the Helix research site. It looked like a parasite attached to a sleeping god. Varro led them through the airlock and into the main corridor. "Section 3 is the primary interface," Varro murmured to Jace. "That is where Kale and the Helix team are running the calibration tests. I will take the squad and trigger a security alarm in the reactor sector. That should pull the guards away." "How long do we have?" Jace asked. 10 minutes, Varro said. "Maybe 15 if I blow something up." "Go," Jace said. Varro signaled her team. They peeled off down a side corridor. Moments later, a muffled explosion vibrated through the floor plates, followed by the blare of a klaxon. "Security alert in Sector 4, a computerized voice announced, 'All non-essential personnel evacuate.'" Guards ran past Jace and Saris, heading toward the smoke. Jace grabbed Saris's arm and pulled her into a service alcove. "This way," he said, checking the schematic Varro had uploaded to his datapad. They moved quickly, dodging patrols, deeper into the facility. The air here was cold and smelled of ozone and recycled water. They reached a heavy blast door marked Restricted, Class 1 Hazard. Jace hacked the keypad with a decoder spike, the lock spinning green after a tense 3 seconds. They slipped inside. It was a maintenance chamber, a gallery that overlooked the main artifact core. Jace stopped. Saris gasped. Below them, in a vast spherical cavern, hung the anchor. It was a sphere of suspended obsidian, 50 meters across, floating above a pit of pure white energy. Rings of glowing metal rotated around it, spinning like a gyroscope. Cables, ugly, human-made cables, were drilled directly into its surface, running back to banks of helix servers lining the walkways. It looked like a torture chamber for a star. "They are forcing it open," Saris whispered. "They are trying to bypass the safety protocols." She walked to the edge of the railing. There was a secondary conduit housing near them, a thick bundle of crystal fiber cables that fed into the main core. Saris reached out. She removed her glove. Her hand was trembling. "Saris, wait," Jace warned. "I need to know," she said. "I need to know what it is." She laid her bare palm against the warm, humming surface of the conduit. The world vanished. Saris was no longer in the underwater facility. She was floating in the void of space, but it was not the cold, empty space she knew. It was alive. She saw the Aetheran ancestors, tall and luminous, arriving on the world eons ago. She saw the sky burning, a supernova in a neighboring system sending a wave of death toward the planet. She saw them build the anchor, not to conquer, not to fight. She saw the sphere activate, casting a translucent, shimmering umbrella over the world. The radiation wave hit the shield and broke, washing harmlessly around the planet. The anchor was a shelter. It was a roof against the rain of cosmic fire. Then the vision shifted. She saw Kale's face. She saw the Helix logo. She felt their intent bleeding into the machine like poison. They were twisting the shield emitters, inverting the gravity field. They were turning the umbrella into a hammer to crush anything that stood beneath it. Saris pulled her hand back with a gasp, stumbling. Jace caught her. "What did you see?" he asked, steadying her. "It is not a weapon," she breathed, her eyes wide behind the visor. "It is a shield. It was made to protect us. Kyle. He is perverting it. He is turning a guardian into a monster." She looked down at the core. The rings were spinning faster. The white light was turning a sickly, unstable red. "They are starting the calibration," she said. "If they lock the targeting sequence now, it will be permanently keyed to Kale's biosignature. We have to stop it." "How?" Jace asked. "We cannot get down there. There are 20 technicians and a squad of guards on the bridge." "I can do it from here," Saris said, looking at the conduit. "It is all connected. I can interface with the core. I can introduce a variance, a wobble in the frequency." She looked at Jace. "It will hurt." "Do it," Jace said. "I have got you." Saris nodded. She stripped off her other glove. She closed her eyes, centered herself, and grabbed the conduit with both hands. This time, she did not just listen. She shouted, not with her voice, but with her blood. She pushed her bioenergy into the crystal fiber, commanding the machine to listen to a true daughter of the line. Down in the cavern, the spinning rings shuddered. The red light flickered. Alarms screamed on the bridge below. Technicians scrambled, looking at their monitors in panic. On the walkway, Saris arched her back, a scream tearing from her throat. The feedback was massive. The machine was ancient and vast, an ocean of data trying to pour into a teacup. Her markings blazed through the jumpsuit, burning the fabric. "Saris!" Jace yelled. He grabbed her shoulders. Her skin was scalding hot. Her eyes were rolled back, glowing pure white. "I am slipping," Saris thought. The artifact was too big. It was pulling her in, dissolving her consciousness into its infinite logic. She was forgetting who she was. She was becoming the shield. She was becoming the stone. She was forgetting Jace, Ceres. Jace's voice came from 1,000,000 miles away. He saw her fading. He saw the way her body was going limp, her mind being overwritten by the machine. He had to ground her. He had to bring her back to the fleshy, messy reality of being human. Ceres, listen to me, Jace shouted, shaking her. Do not you dare leave me here with these corporate stiff suits. She did not respond. Okay, fine, Jace yelled, desperation making his voice crack. You want to pay your debt? This is not how you pay your debt. You pay your debt by staying alive. He leaned close to her ear, shouting over the roar of the energy discharge. And put your pants back on. The words cut through the cosmic noise. In the white void of the interface, Ceres heard it, the absurdity of it, the memory of the cramped cockpit, the smell of cheap whiskey, the look on his face when she had offered herself to him. Take off your pants. A bubble of laughter rose in her chest. It was human. It was ridiculous. It was an anchor to the real world. Ceres gasped, her eyes snapping open. The white glow faded to indigo. She looked at Jace, her face twisted in pain but her mouth twitching into a smile. You are an idiot, she gritted out. Focus on the idiot, Jace said, grinning wildly. Focus on me. Ceres laughed, a jagged, pained sound. She used that spark of humor, that rejection of the solemn, overwhelming power to reassert control. She was not the machine. She was Ceres. She was the woman who had made a fool of herself in a freighter. She twisted her hands, sending a chaotic, spiraling pulse down the conduit. Below them, the anchor groaned. The rings ground to a halt. The red light vanished, replaced by a neutral, dormant gray. Calibration failed. The automated voice droned. System reset required. Ceres let go of the conduit and collapsed. Jace caught her, hauling her up into his arms. She was dead weight, her breathing shallow. We did it, Jace whispered. You broke it. He dragged her toward a heavy door at the back of the maintenance room. He punched the lock, and they fell inside just as the security team burst into the outer chamber. It was a supply closet, filled with spare coolant tanks. It was dark, cramped, and freezing. Jace kicked the door shut and locked it. He slid down the wall, pulling Ceres into his lap. Ceres, talk to me, he demanded, stripping off her polarized visor. She blinked up at him. Her face was pale, sweat tracing lines through the grime. Her markings were dimming, pulsing slowly. I am here, she whispered. I am me. Jace let out a breath that was half sob. He rested his forehead against hers. His hands were shaking as he ran them over her arms, checking for burns. You scared the hell out of me, princess, he said. I scared myself, she admitted. It was so big. Whatever Kale thinks he is doing, he has no idea. That thing is alive. They sat there in the dark, surrounded by the hum of coolant tanks. The adrenaline that had kept them moving began to curdle into something else. They were alive. They were hidden. And they were pressed together in a space smaller than a coffin. Jace looked at her. He saw the smudge of grease on her cheek. He saw the fierce, terrifying strength in her eyes. He saw the woman who had just wrestled a god to a standstill and come back to him because he made a bad joke. Ceres looked at him. She saw the fear in his eyes, fear for her. She saw the way his hands still trembled where they held her waist. The dynamic shifted. The air in the closet grew heavy, charged with the same electricity that had just nearly killed them. Jace, she said softly. Yeah? You are still wearing your pants. Jace huffed a laugh, but it died in his throat. He looked at her mouth. "Are you asking me to take them off?" he asked, his voice low, rough. "I am asking you to kiss me," Saris whispered. "And then, we will see." Jace didn't hesitate. He leaned in, but he didn't rush. He moved slowly, giving her every microsecond to pull away. He treated the space between them as a question. She closed the distance. The kiss was not like the one in the movies. It was desperate. It tasted of sweat and fear and ozone. It was the collision of two people who had been running for days and had finally stopped. Jace's hands tangled in her short, chopped hair. Saris gripped the collar of his jumpsuit, pulling him closer, anchoring herself to his solid, warm weight. There was no transaction here. There was no debt. There was only the fierce, undeniable choice of two people claiming each other in the dark. The outline of the night or the hour they stole in that closet blurred. It was a tangle of limbs and emergency blankets, of whispered names and hands mapping scars. It was Saris discovering that her body was not a bargaining chip, but a vessel for joy. It was Jace realizing that he wasn't taking anything. He was being given everything, later. They lay tangled together under a foil emergency blanket, the blue light of a coolant gauge the only illumination. Saris rested her head on Jace's chest, listening to his heartbeat. It was slower now. Steady. "I was afraid," she said quietly into the silence. "Of the machine?" Jace asked, stroking her arm. "Of you," she admitted. "Of this. I was afraid that if I let myself want you, I would lose my focus, that I would become weak. And now I think it is the only thing making me strong," she said. Jace tightened his arm around her. "I was afraid too. I have spent a long time being alone." "Saris, being alone is safe. You do not have to worry about anyone else's debts. You do not have to worry about losing anyone." He kissed the top of her head. "If we get out of this," he said, "I am going to have a hard time going back to just being a pilot." "If we get out of this," Saris said, tracing the line of his jaw, "you are never just going to be a pilot. You are going to be the man who saved the Empress. I prefer the man who annoyed the Empress until she fell in love with him." Jace murmured. Saris smiled against his chest. That too. A sharp, static chirp from Jace's comms unit shattered the moment. "Hey, lovebirds," Varro's voice crackled through the earpiece. "Are you done saving the galaxy, or are you just saving each other? Because I have guards sweeping the sector and I would really like to leave before they start using thermal detonators." Jace groaned, dropping his head back against the wall. Saris sat up, clutching the blanket, flushing a brilliant, bioluminescent blue. "We are clear." "Varro," Jace said into the comms, his voice husky. "We are finalizing the data." "I bet you are," Varro drawled. "Get your asses to the rendezvous point. We are leaving in 5. Jace and Saris looked at each other. The tension broke, and they both started to laugh, a quiet, shared release. "Work to do," Jace said, sitting up and hunting for his boots. Saris pulled her jumpsuit back on. She felt different. The fabric was the same scratchy synthetic, but the skin underneath felt new. She belonged to herself now. She picked up the datapad Jace had used to hack the door. "Jace, look at this," she said, her voice sharpening. While she had been interfaced with the core, the system had dumped a diagnostic log to the local drive, but it wasn't just diagnostics. It was a communication log. "Here," she pointed. "These are transfer protocols, energy shipments, massive ones." She scrolled down, and here, meeting minutes, recorded conversations between Kale, the Helix board, and... She stopped, her finger hovering over a name. and the chairman of the Human Trade Council. Jace finished, reading over her shoulder. It is not just a coup, Sarah said, her eyes cold. It is a merger. Kale is selling the Empire's sovereignty for a seat on the Trade Council, and Helix is supplying the weapons to enforce it. This is the smoking gun, Jace said. This proves everything. The fake death, the weaponization, the corporate collusion. If this gets out, the Treaty of Orion is void. The Federation would have to intervene to stop Helix. We have to broadcast it, Sarah said. She tapped the screen, accessing the dead drop relay Jace had set up before they entered the city. I am uploading the packet now, she said. I am setting a timer, 24 hours. Why 24? Jace asked, buckling his belt. Because that is when the unification ceremony begins, Sarah said. She looked at him, her expression fierce. If we are not there to stop it in person. This signal goes out to every news feed, every diplomatic channel, and every holoscreen in the sector. It will destroy Kale's legitimacy. It will cause chaos. And if we are there, Jace asked, then I will tell them myself. Sarah said. She hit the execute command. A small countdown timer appeared on the screen. 23:59:59, the clock is ticking, Sarah said. Jace grabbed his tool case and handed Sarah her visor. Then let's not be late, he said. They slipped out of the storage closet, back into the cold, sterile corridor of the facility. They moved differently now. They were not just a pilot and a princess running from a storm. They were partners. They were a team, and they had a wedding to crash. The sky above the silver ocean of Etheria Prime was the color of a bruise. Heavy, slate-gray clouds churned low over the water, threatening a storm that mirrored the tension gripping the capital. The unification ceremony was not being held in the palace. Regent Lord Kale had chosen a venue that screamed of the new world order he was building. The Skydock Platform Alpha. It was a massive artificial island of durasteel and glass, suspended 1,000 feet above the waves by humming gravity tethers. It was sleek, corporate, and soulless. Banners draped the edges of the platform, 50 feet long, displaying the interlaced symbols of the Etheran sunburst and the Helix Dynamics DNA spiral. The air was filled with the buzz of news drones, hovering like carrion flies to beam the event to every system in the sector. On the main deck, thousands of guests had gathered. There were the high nobility of the court, looking uncomfortable in their stiff, jeweled robes, standing shoulder to shoulder with the board members of Helix, who wore suits that cost more than starships. Jace Cade adjusted the gorget of his stolen ceremonial armor. It was white enamel with gold inlay, the uniform of the palace guard. It was also 2 sizes too tight across the shoulders and smelled of industrial cleaner. I feel like a canned sardine, Jace muttered into his internal comms, and I cannot reach my blaster without dislocating my elbow. Quiet, Cirrus whispered back. She stood next to him, indistinguishable from any other guard, her face hidden behind the mirrored gold visor of her helm. We are almost in position. They stood at the edge of the crowd, flanking the central aisle that led to the raised control dais. Behind the dais, the ocean stretched out to the horizon, restless and dark, high above, hidden in the cloud layer. Commander Varro waited in her cloaked stealth corvette. Her voice crackled in Jace's ear, barely audible over the wind. My birds are in position, Varro reported. But Helix has heavy anti-air batteries on the lower spires. If we decloak before the signal, we are dust. You have to wait for the moment. The moment, Jace thought grimly. The moment where we either save the galaxy or get executed on live television. A hush fell over the crowd as a fanfare of trumpets, synthesized and perfectly pitch-corrected, blasted from the speakers. Regent Lord Kale stepped onto the dais. He wore mourning black, but the fabric was silk, and the jewels at his throat were ostentatious. He looked every inch the grieving uncle who had reluctantly taken up the burden of power. Citizens of Etheria, honored partners of Helix, Kale began, his voice amplified to boom across the platform. We gather here today not just to mourn, but to build. My niece, the beloved Princess Ceres, fell to the treachery of separatists. But her dream of a secure, unified empire lives on. Ceres stiffened beside Jace. He could feel the heat radiating from her armor. Her fists were clenched at her sides. To honor her, Kale continued, gesturing to the heavy blast doors at the rear of the platform. We have achieved a miracle of science. Using the preserved genetic legacy of the Aetheran line, Helix Dynamics has given us hope. The doors hissed open. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath that sounded like the ocean sucking back before a wave. A figure walked out. She was wearing a gown of white light weave that shimmered like a star. She was tall. Her hair was a cascade of silver braids. Her skin bore the pale, bioluminescent constellations of the royal line. It was Ceres, but it was not Ceres. Jace stared through his visor, a chill crawling down his spine. The creature on the stage was perfect, too perfect. Her movements were fluid but mechanical, lacking the slight natural hesitation of a living person, and her eyes. Jace zoomed his visor's optics. The eyes were indigo, but they were flat, dead. There was no spark, no soul, and around her neck, hidden beneath a diamond choker, was a thin metallic band, a neural control collar. "Behold the air," Kale proclaimed, spreading his arms, "the new vessel of the Aetheran spirit." Ceres made a sound that was half sob, half growl. "That is me," she whispered, her voice trembling with nausea. "That is my face. They grew it in a tank." Jace reached out, gripping her armored forearm. "Steady. It is a puppet. You are the real thing." The clone stopped beside Kale. She did not wave. She did not smile. She simply stood there, a beautiful hollow shell waiting for a command. "Today," Kale shouted, reaching a fever pitch, "we activate the Aetheran anchor. Not as a relic of the past, but as a shield for our future. With this power, and with our Helix partners, we will bring order to the chaos of the outer rim." He turned to the clone. "Air, place your hand on the interface. Awaken the Guardian." The clone stepped toward the control plinth. The air above the platform began to shimmer as the artifact deep beneath the ocean responded to her genetic signature. "Now?" Jace asked. "Now," Ceres said. But before she could signal the dead drop, the massive holographic screen surrounding the platform flickered. They turned from the live feed of the ceremony to static. A harsh, grinding noise tore through the speakers, replacing the orchestral music. Then, the image resolved. It was not the polished broadcast Ceres had prepared. It was raw data. It was the transfer logs. Documents scrolled down the screens at dizzying speed, magnified 50 feet high. Transfer order 99 Alpha. Subject Ceres Aetheran. Status: terminate. Payment confirmation: Helix Dynamics to account K7. Amount: 1 billion credits. Project Lazarus. Clone viability at 90%. Neural collar engaged. The crowd froze. The silence was absolute. Then came the audio. It was Kale's voice, recorded in the secret meeting Jace and Ceres had uncovered. "I do not care if you have to burn the whole sector," the recorded Kale sneered, his voice echoing over the silent platform. "Get me the girl's blood. The artifact needs the genetic key. Once we have the weapon, the Trade Council will eat out of my hand." On the dais. The real Kale turned pale. He looked at the screens. then at the Helix executives, who were already speaking frantically into their wrist comms. "Turn it off!" Kale screamed, his composure shattering. "Cut the feed. It is a lie. It is a deep fake." The broadcast did not stop. It switched to a video feed, the camera shaky, likely from a hidden drone. It showed the clone in a tank, floating in green fluid, wires drilled into her skull. The crowd erupted. Nobles began to shout. Helix security guards leveled their weapons at the civilians. Panic rippled outward like a shockwave. "Terrorists!" Kale bellowed, his voice cracking. "We are under attack by cyber-terrorists. Security, secure the platform, air. Activate the weapon. We need the shield." He grabbed the clone's arm, forcing her hand toward the interface. He was going to fire the weapon. He was going to use the gravity distortion to crush the platform, kill the witnesses, and claim it was an orbital bombardment. Saris reached up and unsealed her helmet. The hiss of pressurization was lost in the screaming of the crowd. She pulled the helmet off and threw it onto the deck. Her short, jagged hair whipped in the wind. Her markings, no longer hidden by grease or armor, blazed with a fierce, blinding indigo light that shamed the gray sky. "Kyle!" she screamed. Her voice was not amplified, but it carried the harmonic resonance of her rage. Kale froze. He looked down the aisle. Saris stepped forward, her armor gleaming. She pointed a finger at him. "Get your hands off her!" The crowd parted. People gasped, looking from the woman on the stage to the woman in the aisle. The resemblance was undeniable, but the difference was stark. One was a doll, the other was a storm. "She is alive," a duchess screamed. "The princess is alive, kill her!" Kale shrieked, pointing at Saris. "It is an imposter, kill her now!" The Helix guards hesitated for a fraction of a second. It was hard to shoot a legend. That second was all Jace needed. "Varo! Rain!" Jace shouted into his comms. The clouds above tore open. 3 stealth gunships dropped out of the sky, their engines screaming. They did not land. They strafed the perimeter of the platform. Cannons roared, tearing into the Helix dropships parked on the landing pads. Fire bloomed, orange and violent, against the gray sky. Jace drew his blaster, a heavy, illegal heavy pistol he had smuggled under the armor plating. "Get to the dais!" Jace yelled, shoving Saris forward. "I will clear the path." He opened fire. The battle for the platform dissolved into chaos. Helix drones buzzed down from the spires, their lasers stitching lines of fire across the deck. Imperial guards, confused and leaderless, fought back against the Helix mercenaries. Jace moved like a dancer in the mayhem. He shot a drone out of the air, ducked under a plasma bolt, and used the falling wreckage as a shield to shoulder-check a mercenary over the railing. Saris ran. She did not have a weapon. She was the weapon. She sprinted down the central aisle, her eyes fixed on the control plinth. The clone was still standing there, hand hovering inches from the interface, frozen by conflicting commands. "Stop her!" Kale screamed, pulling a gold-plated blaster from his robes. He fired at Saris. The bolt hit her shoulder pauldron, spinning her around. She stumbled, falling to one knee. "Saris!" Jace roared. He saw a heavy combat drone dropping toward her, its targeting laser locking onto her chest. Jace didn't think. He holstered his blaster and broke into a run, leaping off a overturned banquet table. He tackled the drone in midair, his armored weight dragging it down. They crashed onto the deck, metal crunching. Jace jammed his armored fist into the drone's sensor eye, shattering it. He rolled to his feet, panting. "Go!" Jace shouted at her. "Finish it!" Saris scrambled up. Her shoulder burned, but she ignored it. She vaulted up the steps of the dais. Kyle backed away, terror in his eyes. He retreated behind the clone, using the synthetic girl as a human shield. "You cannot stop it," Kale spat. "The sequence is locked. Even if you kill me, the machine wakes up." Saris looked at the interface. The plinth was glowing angry red. The artifact beneath the ocean was powering up. The floor of the platform vibrated so hard that champagne glasses on the table shattered. Far below, the silver ocean began to boil. Giant whirlpools formed as the gravity anchors twisted. The artifact was preparing to invert the local gravity field. In 2 minutes, everyone on this platform would be crushed into paste. I have to override it, Saris said. Looking at the interface, she looked at the clone. The girl stared back with empty eyes. Help me, Saris whispered to her double. The clone did not move. Saris gritted her teeth. She stepped up to the other side of the plinth. She placed both hands on the crystal surface. The connection was instant and violent. It was not like the maintenance conduit. This was the main line. The full consciousness of the ether and anchor slammed into her mind like a freight train. It was vast. It was cold. It was logical. Intruder. The machine voice spoke in her head. Targeting solution active. Gravity well-forming. No, Saris thought, projecting her will. Cancel. Authorization required. Genetic match confirmed. 2 subjects detected. Conflict. The machine was confused. It sensed 2 Sarises, one commanded by the collar, Kale, one free. Merge required for override. The machine stated biological interface must be absolute. Saris understood. To stop the weapon, she couldn't just give a command. She had to become the operating system. She had to pour her entire consciousness into the matrix to drown out the clone's signal. She would have to leave her body unknown, and she might not be able to come back. She hesitated. She looked back at the chaotic battle. Jace was fighting 3 guards at the base of the stairs. His helmet was gone. His face was bloodied. He was firing with one hand and swinging a broken chair leg with the other. He looked up. He saw her hands on the interface. He saw the white light beginning to consume her eyes. He knew what she was doing. Saris, no! Jace screamed. He dropped his guard, taking a glancing blow to the ribs, and scrambled up the stairs. He reached her, grabbing her shoulders. Do not do it, Jace pleaded, shaking her. Do not go in there. You will burn yourself out. I have to, Saris said, her voice sounding metallic, layered with the machine's hum. It is the only way to save them. To save who? Jace yelled over the roar of the engines. The Empire? The people who watched you die. Screw the Empire, I want you. Saris looked at him. The white light was creeping across her skin, dissolving the boundaries of her flesh. If I do not, everyone dies. Jace, she said. Even you. I do not care, Jace shouted. He was crying. Tears cut tracks through the blood on his face. He didn't care who saw. He didn't care about the cameras. Do not erase yourself. Saris, you are not a sacrifice. You are not a martyr. You are the woman who owes me 40,000 credits. You are the woman I love. The words hung in the air, louder than the explosions. I love you. Saris blinked. The white light receded slightly. The human indigo returned to her eyes. He loved her. She looked at the machine. She looked at Kyle, who was cowering. She looked at the clone, who stood frozen in her collar. She realized she had been approaching this wrong. She was trying to fight the machine. She was trying to dominate it, just like Kale. But the machine was a guardian. It wanted to protect. She didn't need to surrender to it. She needed to partner with it. I am not going to erase myself, Saris whispered to Jace. I am going to introduce myself. She closed her eyes. She didn't push. She didn't fight. She opened her mind and offered the machine a single, clear concept. Not power, not control, protection. She showed the machine the image of Jace pulling her from the pod. She showed it the feeling of his hand in hers. She showed it the fierce, illogical desire to keep one person safe, multiplied by billions. See? she told the machine. "This is why we survive." The artifact paused. The red light of the weaponization sequence flickered and died. Then, a new light bloomed. It was not the angry red of Helix, nor the cold white of the ancient past. It was a warm, vibrant gold, the color of dawn. The energy surge was cataclysmic. Jay shielded his eyes as Saris began to glow. She was brighter than the sun. The light poured out of her, washing over the platform, over the city, over the ocean, beneath the waves. The monoliths shifted. The gravity field did not crush the platform. Instead, it expanded upward. A transparent, shimmering barrier erupted from the ocean, rising like a dome to encompass the entire planet. In orbit, the Helix warships fired their turbo lasers. The green beams hit the gold barrier and vanished, absorbed. The energy was dispersed harmlessly across the grid. On the platform, the Helix drones dropped out of the sky. Their weapons were disabled by the dampening field. The blasters in the hands of the mercenaries whined and died. Silence fell over the battlefield. The only sound was the wind and the hum of the barrier. Saris stood in the center of the dais, glowing softly. She breathed out, the light fading back into her markings. She was still there. She was still whole. Jace laughed. It was a broken, incredulous sound. "You did it, you crazy stubborn." Kale crawled out from behind the clone. His plans were ash. His weapon was a shield. His allies were powerless. He looked at Saris, his face twisted in a rictus of pure hate. "If I cannot rule it," he hissed, reaching into his boot, "then no one will." He pulled a holdout slug thrower, a primitive chemical weapon that the energy field couldn't dampen. He aimed at Saris's back. Jace saw it. He moved, but he was too far away. "No!" Jace screamed. Kale pulled the trigger. The crack of the gunshot was small, pathetic compared to the cosmic forces at play. But the bullet never reached Saris. A figure of white light stepped in between them. The clone. The synthetic girl moved faster than a human could. She stepped into the path of the bullet with a fluidity that was almost graceful. The slug hit her in the chest. She stumbled back, colliding with Saris. Saris turned, catching her double as she fell. The clone lay in Saris's arms. The neural collar around her neck sparked and deactivated. For the first time, the deadness left her eyes. She looked up at Saris, at the face that was her own. She blinked. A single, confused tear leaked from her indigo eye. "Why?" Saris whispered, holding the dying girl. The clone's lips moved. Her voice was a rasp, a ghost of Saris's own. "Not an asset," she breathed. Then she was gone. Saris looked down at the girl who had been grown to replace her. The clone had defied her programming. In the end, the echo of humanity within her DNA was stronger than the Helix control codes. She had chosen. She had chosen to save the original. Saris looked up. Her grief hardened into diamond-sharp justice. She looked at Kale. The Regent dropped the gun, his hands shaking. He looked around. Imperial guards were advancing on him. Varro's shuttle was landing on the deck, troops pouring out. On the massive screens, the face of Commander Varro appeared. "Lord Regent Kale." Varro's voice boomed. "You are under arrest for high treason, conspiracy with a foreign corporate power, and attempted regicide." Kale fell to his knees. Above, the Helix executives were running for their dropships. But the ships wouldn't start. The artifact's dampening field had locked down every propulsion system that wasn't authorized. They were trapped in their expensive suits, pounding on the glass of their cockpits. It was over. Saris stood there for a moment longer, the weight of the victory pressing down on her. The barrier hummed overhead, a golden sky protecting her world. Then, her knees gave out. The exhaustion hit her like a physical blow. The channel she had opened with the artifact had drained her to the marrow. She fell. She didn't hit the deck. Jace caught her. He had been waiting. He scooped her up, cradling her against his battered armor. "I have got you," he whispered. "I have got you." Saris looked up at him. Her vision was blurry. She felt light, untethered. "Jace?" she slurred. "I am here. Am I still me?" she asked, terror edging into her voice. "Did I lose myself?" Jace looked down at her. Her face was smeared with soot and sweat. Her hair was a disaster. She looked like a mess. He smiled. It was the softest thing she had ever seen. "Well," Jace said, stroking her cheek with his thumb, "you just saved the world, crashed a party, and you are drooling a little bit on my armor." Saris blinked. "I am not drooling." "You are definitely drooling," Jace insisted. "And you just asked a machine not to kill us because you love me. Which, frankly, is the worst timing I have ever seen." Saris let out a laugh. It was weak, but it was real. "Worst timing?" she murmured. "Or best?" Jace kissed her forehead. "Best," he agreed. "Definitely best." He held her tight as the medics rushed toward them, his laughter vibrating against her chest, anchoring her back to the earth, back to her body, back to the simple, beautiful fact that they were alive. The golden light of the Etherin anchor did not fade. It hung in the upper atmosphere, a permanent aurora that turned the night sky of the capital into a swirling canvas of amber and soft violet. It was no longer a terrifying display of weaponized gravity. It was a blanket, tucking the wounded world in against the cold dark of the void. The debris of the battle had been cleared from the Silver Ocean, though the scars remained. The Helix warships, disabled and drifting, had been towed into low orbit, monuments to a failed hostile takeover. Inside the Grand Spire, the air was cool and smelled of ozone and fresh lilies. The Emergency Council had convened in the Hall of Echoes, a vast chamber where the floor was polished obsidian and the walls were acoustic mirrors designed to amplify the truth, or so the legend went. Saris Aetherin sat at the head of the table. She wore simple robes of white linen, not the heavy ceremonial silk of the past. Her arm was in a sling, and a bandage covered a burn on her cheek. But her posture was straight. She looked less like a porcelain doll and more like a survivor. Around the table sat the remnants of the old power structures and the architects of the new. There were Trade Federation admirals, Etherin high nobles who had defected from Kale, and Commander Ellen Varro, who sat with her boots up on a chair, cleaning her fingernails with a combat knife. The High Chamberlain, a wizened man with a trembling voice, stood up. He held the imperial diadem, a crown of woven light crystal, in his shaking hands. "Your Highness," he began, bowing low, "the regent is in custody. The Helix board is under indictment. The throne is vacant. By the laws of succession and the right of combat, you are the Empress. The people await your command to restore the old order." Saris looked at the crown. It was beautiful. It was heavy. It was a cage. She stood up. The room went silent. "No," Saris said. Her voice was quiet, but the acoustic walls carried it to every corner of the room. A murmur rippled through the nobles. The Chamberlain blinked. "No. Your Highness?" "I will not restore the old order," Saris said, looking around the table, meeting the eyes of the men who had watched her uncle sell her piecemeal. "The old order is what built the clone vats. The old order is what turned my bloodline into a commodity." She walked to the window, looking out at the golden shield protecting her city. "I will take the throne," Saris continued, turning back. "But not as a sovereign owner of this empire. I demand a constitutional restructuring." She held up 3 fingers. 1. Power will be shared with a representative assembly drawn from all castes, not just the nobility. 2. The clone air programs are abolished immediately, and all research data regarding the weaponization of biological assets is to be destroyed. She lowered a finger, her eyes hardening. And 3. We will draft a new Bill of Rights. The first article will state that no body, royal, common, or synthetic may be used as collateral currency or leverage in any political or economic exchange. If a treaty requires a marriage, that treaty is void. If a debt requires a life, that debt is cancelled. The room erupted in whispers. This was not just reform, it was a dismantling of the aristocratic system. The Chamberlain looked pale, but, Your Highness, stability. Stability built on slavery is just a delayed explosion. Saris cut him off. Those are my terms. Take them, or I walk away and let you explain to the people why the woman who saved them is leaving. Varro let out a sharp, barking laugh and stabbed her knife into the table. She has got you there, boys, Varro drawled. I would sign the paper before she asks for your estates, too. The nobles looked at each other. They looked at the golden sky. They looked at the woman who had merged with a god machine and lived. They nodded. Then, the Chamberlain turned to the other figure standing at the back of the room. Jace Cade leaned against a pillar, looking uncomfortable in a clean tunic that Varro had forced him to wear. He was trying to make himself small, which was difficult given that he was currently the most famous human in the sector. Captain Cade, the Chamberlain said, his voice straining with forced gratitude. The Empire owes you a debt that cannot be measured. For your service, the Council offers you the title of Duke of the Outer Rim, a commission as High Admiral in the Royal Navy, and an estate on the Moon of Tides. Plus, of course, a stipend of 10 million credits. Jace pushed off the pillar. He walked toward the table, his boots clicking on the obsidian. He looked at Saris. She was watching him carefully, her expression unreadable. He looked at the Chamberlain. That is a very generous offer, Jace said, scratching the back of his neck. But I am going to have to pass. The Chamberlain choked. Pass? You are refusing a dukedom? I am not really a duke kind of guy, Jace said. I have a problem with authority, mostly my own. And I do not want a fleet. I just want my ship. He placed his hands on the table. Here is my counteroffer. You clear the debt on the Wayfarer's joke, all of it. The fuel tab, the docking fees, the syndicate interest. You wipe my criminal record clean, and you give me a transponder code that lets me fly anywhere in ether and space without being boarded by customs. That is... all? The Chamberlain asked. Baffled. That is all, Jace said. I am a simple man. I just want to fly free. Saris looked down at her hands. Her face remained impassive, but her fingers tightened on the edge of the table until her knuckles turned white. So be it, the Chamberlain said, looking relieved that the hero was so cheap. The Council accepts. The celebration banquet was in full swing in the Great Hall, but Jace and Saris were nowhere to be found. They were in the Royal Solar, a private apartment high in the spire, far away from the noise and the sycophants. It was a beautiful room, with walls of glass that looked out over the endless ocean. Jace stood by the window, looking at the Wayfarer's joke docked on a private pad far below. It was repaired, fueled, and ready to go. Saris sat on a velvet divan, watching him. The silence between them was thick, heavy with things unsaid. So, Jace said, not turning around, you are going to be an empress, a constitutional one, but still. That is a big chair. It is what is needed, Saris said. Her voice was tight. "And you turned down the money," she added. "And the title?" "I told you," Jace said, shrugging. "I am not a duke. I am a pilot. I haul cargo. That is who I am." He turned to face her. He looked out of place in the opulent room. He looked like a wild animal that had wandered into a museum and was afraid of breaking something. "I cannot stay here." "Saris," Jace said softly. Saris felt a cold stone drop into her stomach. She had known this was coming. She had felt it in the way he pulled away when the cameras flashed, the way he flinched when the nobles bowed to him. "Why?" she asked. "Because it is not enough for you?" "No," Jace said, stepping closer. "Because it is too much. Look at this place. Look at you. You are building a government. You have protocols, schedules, guards. If I stay, what do I become? The Empress's pet human? The consort who stands 2 steps behind you and waves?" "I would never treat you like that," Saris said, standing up. "You would not mean to," Jace argued. "But the system would, politics would, and eventually, you would stop seeing me as Jace. You would see me as another political problem to be managed." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "I fell in love with the woman who complained about pockets and hid under a blanket in a supply closet," Jace said. "I am terrified that if I stay in this palace, that woman will disappear, and I will be left with the Empress." Saris felt a flash of anger. It was hot and sharp, cutting through her sadness. "So you are abandoning me?" she accused, her voice rising. "You saved my life. You told me you loved me in front of the entire galaxy, and now that the shooting has stopped, you are running away?" "I am not running away," Jace shouted back. "I am trying to save us. I am trying to keep us real. You are doing exactly what you did in the beginning." Saris stepped forward, poking him in the chest. "You are treating this like a transaction. You think that because the job is done, the contract is over. You think our connection is a debt that has been settled." "I am not the one who talks about debts," Jace snapped. "I am the one who talks about freedom. You want me to trade my life for a gilded cage. You want to lock me up here so you feel safe. I want you to stay because I love you," Saris screamed, tears stinging her eyes. "And I want to leave because I love you," Jace yelled back. They stood there, chests heaving, the echoes of their shouting bouncing off the glass walls. The silence that followed was ringing. Saris wrapped her arms around herself, turning away. "You are right," she whispered, her voice breaking. Jace blinked, the anger draining out of him instantly. "What?" "We are doing it again," Saris said, wiping her face. "We are using the language of trade. I am accusing you of owing me your presence. You are accusing me of trying to own your freedom." She looked back at him, her eyes sad and clear. "Love that feels like a ledger will always curdle," she said. "I learned that from you. If I force you to stay, I become my uncle. I become a tyrant who collects people. And if I leave just to prove I am free," Jace murmured, realizing the truth of it, "then I am just running away from the best thing that ever happened to me." He walked over to the divan and sat down heavily. He put his head in his hands. "We are a mess." "Princess," he said, "a pair of broken, traumatized idiots." Saris sat next to him. She didn't touch him, but she leaned close, their shoulders brushing. "We are," she agreed, "but we are alive." She looked at the golden sky outside. She thought about the constitution she was writing. She thought about the balance of power. "Maybe," she said slowly, "we do not have to choose between the cage and the void. Maybe there is a middle ground." Jace looked up. "I am listening." "I need someone I can trust," Saris said. "Not a sycophant, not a noble. Someone who knows the outer rim." Someone who can go where the Navy cannot. Someone who can carry messages to the Trade Federation and the human worlds without triggering a diplomatic incident. She turned to him, a small smile playing on her lips. I need a free envoy. Jace frowned. A free envoy? An ambassador with no portfolio. Saris explained, no office, no schedule, no standing army. Just a ship and a seal of authority. You would not be part of the court. You would answer only to me. Jace thought about it. He looked at the wayfarer. So I would be a glorious mailman? He teased. You would be my partner. Saris corrected him. You would fly. You would go out there and make sure the peace holds. You would come back when you wanted. And when you are here, you are just Jace. And when I am gone, Jace asked. Then I will miss you, Saris said simply. And I will look forward to your return. That is how normal people love. Jace. In the spaces between the departures and the returns, Jace looked at her. He saw the wisdom in her eyes, hard-won wisdom born of survival. She was offering him a way to be useful without being owned. She was offering him a home that had a door he could open. I can keep the ship? Jace asked. You can keep the ship, Saris promised. And I do not have to wear this tunic? You can burn it. Jace smiled. It was a real smile, wide and relieved. Deal, he said. Later that night, the reception had ended. The palace was quiet. Jace and Saris stood on the balcony of the Solar, the wind from the silver ocean ruffling their hair. The artifact's field pulsed overhead, a heartbeat of light that kept the darkness at bay. Jace leaned against the railing, holding 2 glasses of cheap, synthetic wine he had smuggled in from his ship. He handed one to Saris. To the free envoy, he toasted. To the constitutional empress, Saris replied, clinking her glass against his. They drank in silence, watching the waves. The tension of the argument was gone, replaced by a comfortable, settled peace. They had negotiated the terms of their peace treaty, and it was solid. You know, Saris said, swirling her wine, I was thinking about our first meeting. Oh God, Jace groaned. Please do not. I was so sure of myself, Saris mused, a playful glint entering her eyes. I walked into your cockpit, wearing a dress worth more than your life, and I made you an offer I thought you could not refuse. You terrified me, Jace admitted. I thought you were going to stab me. I told you to take off your pants, Saris reminded him, moving closer. I remember, Jace said, taking a sip of wine. I am still recovering from the trauma. Saris set her glass down on the railing. She turned to him. She reached out and ran a finger down the front of his shirt, popping the top button. It was a transaction then, she whispered, her voice dropping an octave. I was trying to buy my life. I was trying to pay a debt. She stepped into his space. She smelled of the sea and starlight. But now, the debt is cleared. The ledger is closed. She popped another button. Jace stopped breathing. He watched her face, illuminated by the golden aurora. He saw the confidence there, not the brittle, trained confidence of a princess, but the warm, earthy confidence of a woman who knows exactly what she wants. So, Saris said, her hand resting flat against his chest, over his heart. If I were to make a request now, it would be different. What kind of request? Jace asked, his voice rough. Saris looked up at him through her lashes. She leaned in until her lips were brushing his ear. Take off your pants, she whispered, echoing the words that had started it all. She pulled back, looking him in the eye, her expression fierce and tender and incredibly flirtatious. And stay, she finished. Not as payment, not as duty, as my choice, and yours. Jace stared at her. He remembered the frightened girl in the torn dress. He looked at the Empress standing before him. He set his wine glass down on the railing. He laughed, a low rumble of pure contentment. He reached out and pulled her against him, burying his face in her neck. "I am staying," he murmured against her skin, "because I choose to, and because I realized something." "What?" Saris asked, her hands tangling in his hair. "For 40 years. "I thought home was a port," Jace said, lifting his head to kiss her. "I thought it was a place where you refueled and left. But I was wrong." He kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her lips. "Home is a person," he whispered. "You are my home." Saris. Saris melted against him. The wind whipped around them. The light shone above them. And for the first time in the history of the Etherean Empire, the power on the balcony was perfectly, beautifully balanced. The first year of the new era. The council chamber was full. The new representative assembly was in session. Miners sat next to dukes. Scientists sat next to poets. Saris stood at the podium. She wore a simple suit of Aetheran silk. Her markings glowed softly as she spoke. "We do not build walls anymore," she told them, her voice ringing with conviction. "We build bridges. The artifact is not a shield to hide behind. It is a shelter we share. Today, we welcome the delegation from the Human Trade Federation not as rivals, but as neighbors." The assembly applauded. Saris smiled. She looked tired, but happy. Deep space, Sector 4. The Wayfarer's joke dropped out of hyperspace. It looked different now. The hull had been patched, the engines tuned, and it sported a discreet gold seal on the flank. Jace sat in the pilot's chair, his feet up on the console. Whale migration confirmed. Jace said into the comms, "Thousands of them. It is incredible, Ceres. You should see the bioluminescence. It matches yours." On the small hollow screen, Ceres sat at her desk, piles of data pads around her. She looked up, her eyes lighting up at his voice. "Record it for me," she said. "And Jace, be careful. The trade routes are still unstable near the nebula. I am always careful." Jace lied smoothly. "You are a terrible liar," Saris said, smiling. "Come home soon." "I am already spooling the drive," Jace promised. The reunion. The hangar bay was quiet. It was late. The ramp of the Wayfarer hissed down. Jace walked out, carrying a duffel bag and a strange, glowing flower from a jungle moon. Saris was waiting for him. She wasn't wearing her crown. She was wearing a sweater and jeans. She didn't wait. She ran across the deck. Jace dropped the bag and caught her, spinning her around. Their laughter echoed in the vast, empty space. He kissed her before her feet touched the ground, a desperate, hungry kiss that tasted of long weeks apart. "I brought you a flower," Jace said, breathless. "It tried to eat me twice." "It is beautiful," Saris said, burying her face in his shoulder. "You are late. I ran into a solar storm," Jace excused himself. "And a very talkative customs officer." "I missed you," Saris whispered. "I missed you too," Jace said, holding her tighter. "Let's go home." The end. The cockpit of the Wayfarer's joke was dim, lit only by the soft hum of the standby lights and the glow of a hollow screen projected in the air. Jace and Saris were curled up together in the pilot's chair, which was definitely not designed for two people. It was a tangle of limbs, a blanket, and a bowl of synthetic popcorn balanced precariously on the navigation console. "I am telling you, this is a classic," Jace insisted, gesturing at the screen where a hero in a rubber suit was fighting a monster made of obvious papier-mâché, Star Beast from the Black Lagoon. "It is cinema history. It is garbage," Saris said, stealing a handful of popcorn. The zipper on the monster's suit is visible. I can see it. Look, right there. It adds to the charm, Jace defended. You royals have no appreciation for gritty realism. Realism? Saris laughed, poking him in the ribs. You literally fought a combat drone with a chair leg. That was more realistic than this. That was a tactical improvisation, Jace grumbled, putting his arm around her shoulders and pulling her closer. And I looked cool doing it. You looked terrified, Saris corrected, resting her head on his chest. But you were very brave. She looked at the screen, then up at him. The golden light of the artifact drifted past the viewport outside, a reminder of the cosmic power they had wielded, the wars they had stopped, the history they had written. But here, in the cramped cockpit of a freighter, none of that mattered. There were no speeches to give, no treaties to sign, no debts to pay. There was just the hum of the ship, the taste of salty popcorn, and the warmth of the person she loved. Can we watch the one about the romantic accountants again? Saris asked teasingly. Absolutely not, Jace said, feigning horror. That movie is a crime against humanity. We are watching the Star Beast. Fine, Saris sighed, snuggling deeper into his side. But if the monster starts singing again, I am taking over the ship and flying us into a star. Deal, Jace said, kissing the top of her head. He looked out at the stars, then down at the woman in his arms. She was already half asleep, her breathing syncing with the slow pulse of the ship's idle drive. Jace smiled. He didn't watch the movie, he just held her, content in the quiet, ordinary magic of a life chosen, not bought. Computer, he whispered softly. Dim lights to 10%. Acknowledged. The ship hummed. The lights faded, leaving them wrapped in the soft glow of the stars and each other. Two voyagers who had finally found their way home.